we're trying to understand the client and their intention. And I think that North Star is the helpful thing, because every time they start to go outside of it, we can bring them back.
Well, very excited for the podcast today. We have Kate O'Hare on. Welcome, Kate.
Well, thank you, Brad. I've been excited to get to schedule this and be on the pod with you.
Yeah, I know it's tough. I mean, and really a quick intro here. Kate is you're the CEO and creative director for O'Hare Interiors, and then also, I don't want to miss this, but also the founder of Fay and Bell Rugs. I want to get to that in a second, but I know schedule wise, you're working between two cities, which we'll get into, and really all over the U.S. And we've been connected through so many events. We spoke together at a panel and High Points, so it's been a long time coming. So thank you for making time today.
Oh my gosh, when you invited me to be on the podcast, I was just so excited. I knew we would get there eventually between your schedule and mine. You've got a pretty busy schedule yourself.
Well, it's the same. And then, just truth be told, we had something scheduled and something came up from my side. And then, of course, I was trying to, get you before market, but you were there before me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think that she's at market, kind of rough timing, but
Well,
like
no,
ships in the night sometimes.
this works perfectly. Yeah.
So walk me through this. I want to get to the design side. I mean, you have so much experience. You're so well spoken. I know, again, I've listened to so many podcasts you've been on, and Kate is really talented. With the rugs, speak to me about why you started your own rug collection.
Well, this was a number of years ago. I think there are some great options now available to people, but we were struggling when our clients wanted something really unique and special. We had some lovely partners that we were working with, but there were just, there were delays. There were so many steps involved in developing a custom rug that we kept saying things like, gosh, it's too bad we can't just do this for ourselves. And we being myself and my mom, because she was at the time running Martha O'Hara Interiors, which is now O'Hara Interiors. And and at some point, it dawned on us that rugs don't break in transit, right? That's one of the real reasons nobody wants to get into certain types of product, is just all of the shipping issues. Well, rugs don't break, and so we thought we can maybe solve this for ourselves. So we went overseas to Turkey and Nepal. We figured out where we could source things and how we could go about doing it, and streamlined the process for ourselves. So now, when our team needs to source a vintage rug, something one of a kind, or wants to put something like a tiled vintage rug together, or if we want to do a custom hand knot rug in like wool or silk or something like that, we can do it for ourselves. And over the course of time, this was over 10 years ago now, and we're, as you alluded to, we're a little bit of a larger design firm. So we've had designers who, they come and go from time to time. Most of our designers stick with us for decades, for decade and longer. But people do sometimes come and go, and when they have, they've almost always said, "But can I still order those rugs?" So
Awesome.
we've started working with designers as they need it, as well. It was sort of a happy accident.
Well, I have a few questions with this because I think the most interesting thing about entrepreneurship is like a lot of us are entrepreneurs because you're either born that way or you're like forced into it, right? And you already
Mhm.
had the design business that's very successful, that you and your mom run. But here you are seeing a need in the organization as far as, customized rugs. And so, forced into creating something that, is going to fill a pain point there. And what's interesting is years ago I had Ashley Stark on, and she said the same thing. Like she Stark Carpet, like they do a lot in Nepal and
Mhm. Yeah.
over on that in that side. And so how difficult was it for you to, set up a vendor, to build relationships, to get, call it, as you're working through this, to coordinate something that's so far on the other side of the world, on the other side of the world.
It was remarkably easy, but that doesn't mean it was really easy at all.
Hmm.
It was one of those challenging things that was pretty simple. And I think that that's a lot of what entrepreneurship is it's one step at a time. It's the elephant you're trying to eat, right? So it's as complicated as you make it for yourself, because if you just take one step at a time, it winds up feeling pretty simple. If you try to do all 75 steps at once every single day until all 75,000 are done, it doesn't feel as simple. So we really were trying to solve a problem for ourselves. And because of that, we didn't have this need to like get to market fast and launch,
Hmm.
launch, launch. We were just solving a problem. So we were able to be a little bit more moderate in our pace. And I will admit that we benefited too from the fact that my brother, who had just sold a company, entrepreneurship just runs in the family, and he had just had a nice moment and had a little time. I used to joke with him that I used to say he was unemployed, but it was not. It was the unemployment everyone dreams of, right? And so he had some time, and he did some of that traveling and groundwork, which was good because, of
Hmm.
course, I feel like you were just talking to Amber about this. It's so hard when you're running a company that it's hard to find the time to step away, and it's hard to find time to step away to self-reflect and work on processes, as you and Amber were talking about. But it also would have been difficult for both of us to step away to do some of laying down some of that groundwork. So my brother helped take on some of that. Initiating, which he's very good at, and then we've been able to run with it from there. But honestly, one step at a time, we stayed focused on the problem we were trying to solve, and then the other opportunities really revealed themselves as we've gone.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, to your point, it's hard to find time to work on processes. It's hard to find time to travel, not out of leisure, but out of, circumstance, if you will. And then, now you've had, contacts, you've had people that have worked for the company, sourcing from you. Do you plan, what do you envision this in the future? Is this continue to be, um, just another element of O'Hare Interiors? Do you plan it to be bigger? How involved is it now based on, potential growth?
It's a company that could grow without a
Mhm.
doubt. How much? I think we've been pretty comfortable sitting in this kind of, we're almost a secret, we're this boutique
Mhm.
that's almost a secret. But what I will say is we've reached a point where if we had a dozen or even 5 dozen designers come to us and say we all want to order rugs, we could handle that at this point. We've figured out production. And so we're kind of sitting here thinking, asking ourselves that very question: do we want to grow this? Because um, that takes time and effort. And
Mhm.
so we're in that moment that I think a lot of us find ourselves in from time to time, when we realize we've got something that has legs, but is it the thing we want to do? And right now, my mom actually is having a blast with it. She's my co-founder, and we have been seeing a number of designers kind of outside of our little circle and network starting to ask and inquire. So if anyone's interested in a rug, head to Fay and Bell Rugs. But at the same time, we're going to let the market sort of decide a little bit for us as we step into this, step into kind of the being a little bit more forward facing. We've got so much going on with Martha or with O'Hara Interiors
Mhm.
that honestly, Brad, it's just hard to
Yeah.
know. It's
Yeah,
hard to
it's
know.
true. Yeah, it's hard to know how much you wanna, like, spread out in a way, especially as your core
Yeah.
business is doing so well. Walk us through some of the successes you're having right now with O'Hare Interiors.
Well, we're a residential interior design firm. We work with builders and architects and homeowners as well on everything from, full construction, new builds to high-end remodels, and then occasionally just furnishing an entire home. We're kind of happy to step in any of those scenarios. I always say people will ask, "Well, what are your minimums?" And
Mhm.
that's just a common question, I think, among other business owners. People want to understand, how do you scope things? And I've always stood pretty firmly on the idea that I'm more focused on whether we can deliver what our clients want for the amount that they're intending to invest than on a specific scope.
Mhm.
And I also want to make sure that our business doesn't, I never want to be a business that has to turn our own clientele away because we have a client whose project is too small. So, when you have a past client that you've worked with on a beautiful project and they come to you with something maybe a little bit smaller, but there's going to be a project beyond, I'd never want to be in a position of having to turn that project away because we've out processed ourselves from being able to do it. So we try to maintain a little bit of core flexibility. But we have locations up in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and also down in Austin, and teams located in both places. And we are opening this year in Dallas as well. And
Wow. Wow.
yeah, we have one designer there now, and our lead designer, one of our lead designers in Austin, is moving there in just a couple of months to take the lead on a number of projects that we have going on.
It's incredible. So walk us through. I mean, what's unique about design is there is a flexibility, right? Where you can
Mhm.
work in different markets, is what's the methodology as you're thinking about? Because as a builder, how it relates to me is if I really want to be successful, not that you have to have brick and mortar, but you kind of need brick and mortar. You need a footprint. You need, suppliers and trade partners and subcontractors, right? And so you really need someone in your operations that's willing to be in Dallas, to be in Park City, right? Be in Minneapolis. For you as a designer, you have that flexibility. However, it sounds like you have someone moving there to Dallas, so it makes perfect sense. How does, strategy behind being in these multiple cities, having brick and mortar, being that you still have the flexibility to travel as needed?
Yeah, we work with clients all over the US. So at any given time, we might get a call from California, Seattle, Florida, New York, you name it. We've got projects right now in your area too, Brad.
Yeah.
And so like we're always working just about everywhere, because our clients don't, often have more than one home. And so or they're ready to move somewhere warmer than the Twin Cities, or they need somewhere to go when Austin gets too hot. So we've always known how to work remotely, and we had to figure that out long before the pandemic. I think made people really comfortable with the idea of it. I think there was a real shift in sentiment among a lot of homeowners and clients about that comfort level. But we were getting calls before that, and we had a lot of local clients with multiple homes who
Mhm.
wanted us to work. So we had figured out how to do that, how to stretch ourselves. And to do that, we're very fortunate. We've been in business for over 30 years. We have incredible partners in both construction and on the furniture side of things from that vendor supplier standpoint. So we might find ourselves contacting a national supplier to say, hey, who do you recommend in this market? Who do you recommend in this market for installation, for doing things that we might be asked to help with? So we've kind of figured out how to navigate even the really localized parts of the process, from warehousing and installation and so on. But to say you have a dedicated presence somewhere means someone has to live there, at least for some
Mhm.
portion of the year. It's hard to
Right.
say we're in Palm Springs and you don't have
No,
an
it's right.
address, or no one's, yeah, there's nowhere someone can find you. So there's kind of two different ways. I think a lot of architectural firms do really well in being anywhere, because they really can focus, especially if they're focusing on technical drawings and passing the baton of selections to a designer more locally. Um, and then you have designers who are sitting a little bit between architects and builders, where we have a lot of materials we actually have to use and function with, but we can coordinate with installation teams because we're not overseeing installation nearly to the degree that a builder would be. And then builders are a little bit landlocked because you have to have
Mhm.
these incredible teams and you have to be able to really hold faith in everything they do.
Yeah, it is true. But to your point, I mean, from a design perspective, if these are great markets and you have repeat clients and you still have to deal with, the freight and furniture and as you mentioned, I mean, you've solved the rug issue, but I'd imagine from window coverings and draperies and other, right? I mean, there's so
Oh,
many
yeah.
elements that you need local talent, right? That makes it so much easier for you to perform.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime a client is coming to us from a city that we haven't worked in recently or haven't worked in at all before, the first thing we have to do is sit down and go through kind of our process of researching who our partners are going to be. And sometimes we benefit from the knowledge of the builder we're working with, or a local architect, or the client themselves, because they've had certain things done before, and so they know who they want to use for certain things. But frequently, we're leaning on our own partners. We don't just go straight to Google. We we need to know that the a wallpaper of this caliber is often installed by this person in this market, or so on.
Yeah, and walk us through. I mean, being that you're such an integrated design company, very
Mhm.
talented. I would imagine in a lot of these builds, you're involved in the architecture, right? A lot of architects will,
Yeah.
work with the designers on, on finishes and substrates and, floor plan and so forth. And so when you're working these new markets, walk us through the process of, are you utilizing that builder, that architect, to understand some of the local supply chain? Um, it's really tough for you because you may be able to envision this, right, Kate? The builder probably can, but in most cases the client can, and so you're trying to get physical samples and work with local manufacturers and trade partners, and could be a local cabinet company, so you want to do stain samples and paint samples and so forth. Walk through the complexity of what, when you're looking at a project out of state, what it takes for you to mobilize and really make this successful.
Sure. Well, I don't know if we are quite as perfectly processed as you are, because I know you,
I don't know if we're
I don't
perfect.
know, you are the
Yeah.
pinnacle.
No.
But we try to be ourselves. We try, like, taking a step back, so you kind of know the mindset that I have. I know that when it comes to custom builds, we might be, as interior designers, the last professional phone call that's made. It's in all likelihood, depending on the market, it will be the builder or the architect who gets the first call. And because of that, because we're likely to be the last phone call, unless it's a client of our own,
Hmm.
which
Right.
frequently happens, um, we need to be both incredibly process oriented so that we're making our partners' lives easier, but also flexible enough, especially in how we begin the process, to be able to do what we all prefer, which is to be involved early on in conversations with the architect and the builder in creating the thoughts behind the plan, in addition to working within the plans themselves. But there are moments that we have to step in further along in the process, further along into how far are the architectural plans. And we can choose when it feels like a good fit, but we also need to have a process of our own that gives us some flexibility to say, okay, they're through the majority of thinking through these plans. We can review, we can offer some feedback, but the
Hmm.
revisions have to be relatively light at this point, and we're focused more on detailing. We've got to be willing to do that to be able to work with everyone who might come our way, and if the project feels like a good fit. So we start kind of there, in just thinking we need to be process oriented, but we also have to have some flexibility about where we step in. We also have to do that because different architects really imagine their services differently. So
Hmm.
there are architects who truly get the technical drawings done and they're out. And there are architects who want to be involved all the way through to furniture layouts, like actual furniture layouts, not the imagined at the beginning of the project layouts. And so again, because of that differential, we like to start every project really sitting down with our partners, understanding exactly what our role is. And then once we know our role, once we really understand where are we stepping in, where are we sharing responsibilities, and where do the responsibilities lie solely in our hands, then we can really sit down and also figure out who are going to be our partners and resources from start to finish. But as soon as we know we're working in an area, we have members of our team who are looking for, okay, who's our warehouse, who are likely, window, who's going to be handling window treatments. Are we just going to handle them locally and ship them out, or is there a local shop that will fabricate them? How do we want to handle various types of installation? We are talking to our builder partners often about any preferred material sourcing. Sometimes there is education that goes into working in different markets, because what you can
Hmm.
do in one area you can't do in another. Up north, there are sometimes just these incredible climate considerations that you might
Right.
not have to consider, but then you might have different climate considerations you
Right.
do, and that can change the types of materials that one material that's ideal for one climate is going to warp in another. So it starts with that education of just knowing what are the givens and what are the things that we can't use so that we can avoid having to change too much along the way. And then we start lining everything up from there. So it's kind of, we start with what is our role exactly, like we know what we can do, but what is our role? Then we move into what are any like considerations specific to this area where we're working, and then we start building out any team members that we will be responsible for beyond the build team themselves, roughly.
Right. It's a great answer. I mean, I love the collaboration, with call it local talent in a way, their opinion, because yeah, the products differ. I mean, look,
Hmm.
Minnesota to Phoenix is a huge drastic difference from, temperatures throughout the year and climate. It's funny because, my experience, has evolved over the years, right? And for all those builders listening, it's funny because a lot of builders will reach out and be like, Brad, how did you get to this point? How do you have this growth, from what they see? And I always tell them, I mean, my secret to success is working with incredible interior designers. Like, there's no way AFT would be where we were today without the interior design community because, whether it's being recognized through awards or publications and great content, I mean, all the above, right? And of course, build times are better. I mean, we could go on forever. Point being is that what's interesting in my career is that I've seen that kind of this move that a lot of the builders are understanding value of design. Now, it's not everywhere. We're working on that, Kate. So
Well, we
this is
appreciate that from all
yeah.
designers everywhere. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, so this is something we've been pushing, but the funny thing is this is not all architects. I'm not going to call any out, but there is some of them that have a hard time with design, right? I've seen
Hmm.
where some architects are incredibly pro design,
Hmm.
interior designer, and some struggle. And whether it's because you're both creators, both in design, whether they feel, hey, to your point, you're trying to tread lightly coming in if you're in late to not change this entire design, right? But at
Hmm.
the same time, there's things you're thinking about that are like, this makes a lot more sense to someone who's living and operating in the home. How do you find that balance when you see that resistance coming from maybe a fellow creator, from the architect, and creating that balance? I know that's a tough question, but
It
I'm sure
is,
it's
but
something you and your team deal with regularly.
yes, yes to both. It's difficult, and we do run into it. Um, I understand where an architect's coming from. They're the originating creative of the project generally. And so they have a vision that they've come up with the client and they feel strongly about it. And it can be a scary thing to pass it into the hands of a builder, let alone to pass it into the hands of an interior designer who might change the vision from their perspective. What what we try to do, I think what most designers try to do, but I know what my team tries to do, is we try to understand what is that North Star, what is that goal, and then how can we take the that high level idea. An architect's idea sometimes feels a little bit more high level, a little bit less about the practical everyday living that we really have to think about when we're thinking about every piece of furniture going into the house, and that you have to think about too as you're building things. So that's where we then sometimes have to translate, because what sounds amazing as an idea doesn't always translate directly or literally, but we can find a way to make it work. We try to be that partner. But that's why, I guess, to answer your question, that's why we start with that first conversation among pros. Without the client in the room, we want to have the conversation about what what is everyone's role, and how do we want to have conversations if we ever disagree or have something else we want to share. Do we take that offline first and chat among pros, or can we talk openly in front of the client? How do we conduct that? And then maybe this is a little bit more on the build side, but when things go awry, there is,
Yeah,
what
which they
is the
do.
protocol? They do.
Yeah,
I mean, inevitably, there's no
yeah.
perfect project. So when something goes unexpectedly, what is the protocol? Because our goal would be to solve every problem before the client ever hears about it. And ideally, our goal would be that the client never have to. But we certainly don't want to be, profiting from someone else's mistake, or throwing anyone under the bus. And, we don't want to find ourselves under that bus either if we're the ones who misstepped or missed a communication. So we want to just feel like this is a locked in team from the outset. Um, A lot of what we do is just try to create a relationship with the architect early,
Mhm.
especially if we can tell that they want to be involved further into the process. And occasionally we do just have to, after a meeting, touch base and say, "Hey, you've mentioned something a couple of times, and I have some concerns about it because of XYZ. Can we work out something we both agree on?" And then bring it to the client in a uniform way. That's ideal. Realistically, that doesn't always get to happen. I mean, we know I'm acting like we have all the hours in the world, all the time in the world, and we can just have every conversation we need to. Ideally, that's what we do. And we have. I mean, I can think of a time within the last year that we really had to say, "Hey, pros, client aside, let's get together. We've had a couple of miscommunications within this project. So, something's awry. Let's figure out how we can line this up." And that's usually all it takes is that conversation. Because everyone, with very rare exceptions, usually everyone's on this type of project is in it to see it really done successfully and well. You don't
Yeah.
hit a certain level without having a certain level of professionalism to what you do.
Yeah, it's very good feedback. And I mean, you made a comment earlier, Kate, you were speaking about the North Star. And what's interesting about that point, my perspective is, we found a lot of value, probably like you, where you're trying to understand the architect's maybe mindset as they're going into design. For us as the builder, we're not only trying to understand what the architect's envision, but also you as a designer, right, Kate?
Yeah.
That where our estimating team has found tremendous value over the years, especially the last couple of years that we've been doing this, is like we do like a page turn, right? So we're sitting down
Hmm.
doing that page turn with you and your team, and because the reality is there's meetings that you're having, there's important details to this house that are very important either to you or the client, and we weren't privy to those. And I'll give one example. We had an experience. This was probably a year ago, 8 months ago. And our team did not do the page turn with the architect.
Hmm.
And in preparation for the meeting, when we had priced it out, we knew that it was going to be over budget what the client was expecting. And so we always kind of have a high low. We come in prepared with a high and a low. We've done some preliminary value engineering and they did not run it by the architect. And so, like in this meeting, you could feel the tension because architects like, these are important details. Like you can't take these out. Like HOA is
Right.
involved, and the client wants them. And so, point being is that understanding that North Star really, having these meetings outside of that, where, to your point, most people are very amicable that way. That we could say, okay, Kate, these are really important details. Maybe us as the builder can look at this detail and say, okay, well, maybe there's another way to achieve it. Are you okay with this? Because maybe it's more cost effective or so forth. But understanding that makes a huge difference going into the design process for sure.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's on us to insist on certain conversations. As designers, we telling stories now. We had a we had a project during the pandemic when, I mean, everything was running so far behind that some builds, were looking for any efficiency that they could create, and sometimes the efficiencies could cut an important corner that didn't strike you as necessary but turned out to be like, well, we kind of wish we'd had that meeting now. And I can think of one project where uh, a site walkthrough was skipped. And we should have, looking back, we should have insisted. We should have simply insisted this had to happen because, we've done the paperwork, we've done the drawings, things have been communicated, but it doesn't mean that the installer has seen and heard all of these things. Good. He hasn't been in every one of these meetings. And a significant light fixture, linear, was installed perpendicularly to the direction it was meant to. And this was not something that was like an
Uh,
easy, let's just turn it and no problem. This was a big piece.
yeah.
And it was one of those moments where it was like, oh, we wanted that site walkthrough for a reason, but then, we didn't insist. We didn't say you have to be there. You have to show up.
Right.
And so we all kind of learn our lessons about when we can be flexible and when we really shouldn't be. And sometimes being a like productive, like a good teammate is saying we have to do this thing that I know why you don't want to do it. I know you're trying to save a week and in the build, but we have to do this. So that goes both ways, and we just really try hard to find ways to be a good teammate, and we sometimes have to remind ourselves that sometimes it means insisting.
Hmm. How do you push back with the client? I'd imagine there's times where, or do you, how
Mhm.
when you have a client that maybe insisting on something that it could be a design detail that you think may, not be great for them to maintain over time. Maybe it's something that impacts the overall, scheme and aesthetic. How do you work when a client's very insistful on something?
Well, I will often say our job is to make it easy for our clients to make good decisions because at the end of the day, they are the deciders, not us.
Mhm.
So we can present everything that we think they should do. We can tell them all the reasons something is a bad idea. And sometimes a client will still decide to do the thing that we just do not agree with. And maybe we don't agree because we know that is not a floor tile and it's going to crack. But you're bound and determined to put it on your floor. And so, if we feel strongly enough, we've had clients sign off before that they
Hmm.
understand that they're doing this against the express recommendation. And then when the floor tile cracks, we work with them to replace it. In that, just random example. But I mean, ultimately, we're trying to understand the client and their intention. And I think that North Star is the helpful thing because every time they start to go it outside of it, we can bring them back. And I, that concept of a North Star, I kind of am borrowing from a fabulous Dallas designer, Jean Liu, who I heard speak on a panel, and she used that phrase, and it really stuck with me. And I know that she's not the first to use the phrase, but it was a phrase that really stuck with me because we're in the Lone Star State, and Minnesota used to be home to the North Stars, so I think it resonated. But circling back to that North Star is really helpful because it is so easy to fall in love with a thing or an idea. And it is an entire other thing to pull it all together into a beautiful whole. And that's what we're trying to do. And that thing that someone falls in love with, when it doesn't work, it usually is just not contributing to that beautiful whole. And so when we can return back to that idea, then a client is usually willing to kind of let go. We also sometimes can take that idea that isn't a great idea in one application and maybe suggest, you know what, you when we get to the casita, that's when we're going to do this idea. This isn't for the main house. This is for the casita. Or hey, we're going to be working on your house up north soon. Let's reserve that for that project. So sometimes we can put a pin in things and say, this is, you've come up with a brilliant idea for a future project, but it doesn't have a place in this one. And sometimes we just let the client sign off and say, yeah, I've decided on this, that I insist.
One thing that can be challenging going back to, clients, whether they've done it in the past, whether it's, a new build for them, how do you, when they're trying to articulate their design, what they want, for you to download that, what does that onboarding creative process look like for you to know that you're going the right direction from the start, as you are preparing to present to them?
Yeah, I mean, we like photos. I bet like everyone, we really like photos. We want to learn about our clients' aesthetics, but we also do want to learn about their lifestyles. And, when you have a client, it's you can have the same client designing vastly different homes for vastly different purposes over the course of their life. You they might have their family house that's so up north, as an example, we might have a client who we work with on a relatively modest city home because Minnesotans are notoriously modest about how they kind of present themselves in their wealth. But that same client might then build a true estate up north on the lake or wherever they go in the winters, somewhere south. So we might have homes with vastly different scale and personality. And then one is the golf house, and one is the lake house, and one is the city home. And so they're serving very different purposes. They might host different people. So really important, even for the same client, for us to understand what's the aesthetic and purpose and functionality of the house. And that helps to craft a story about what this North Star is. I'm curious how you do it with your clients because I imagine you have a process for having that conversation.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm sure, like you, over the years, you kind of learn certain questions to ask them, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
mentioned how they're living, their aesthetic, things that are important to them. It probably helps you like understanding that aspect of who they are helps you kind of envision everything. For us as the builder, um, yeah, personality is a big part. You mentioned that, yeah, early on in the conversation. You said that price isn't, we don't have a minimum. And the reason we
Hmm.
don't have a minimum is because these could lead to other opportunities, and it's about the relationship, which I think really hits home, because for us, same thing. I tell our clients, we don't have a minimum. It doesn't matter if they're spending $5 or 10 million, right? You want to work for good people. The thing is,
Hmm.
from our perspective as the builder, these are very long relationships, like typically 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And,
Yeah.
it's not like I see you every 3 months. I mean, these are like weekly, check-ins, meetings, some clients daily, right? So the reality is, I mean, it's, that relationship is really important to us. And so we, we really want to understand where they're at in the journey. I mean, have they built before? And that kind of helps us gauge, right? Whether the team we put on it. It really helps us understand who's the design and architectural team. That'll influence that. But really what it comes down to is trying to understand what their goal is. We're a cost plus contractor, so budget's fairly easy in a way that, it's very transparent. And so we try to get past this cat and mouse game of like what the budget is, because the more that we can understand their budget, the
Hmm.
more we can strategize with you, Kate, with the architect, and
Right.
create a collaborative team. And so we're really big on letting them understand, helping them to understand the value of bringing in the team early and knowing what the budget is, so that everyone can work alongside that. And it just allows for much less surprises, over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And it's true. When you sometimes knowing who your partners on a project can be paints such a clear picture of the project before you know
Hmm.
anything about aesthetic or lifestyle,
Right.
because different builders and architects really build different things. And I imagine you feel the same way about designers. Um, if I know that there's a landscape architect already involved, like that tells me a lot about the project and it hasn't begun
Hmm.
yet, because of how they're considering the property beyond the interior home itself. And I find too that one, I like knowing where my clients live, like not just them, but their extended family.
Hmm.
That often tells me a little bit about how they live and where they travel. And I always ask, I don't often ask my clients about their design aesthetic anymore. Instead, I will say, I want to learn a little bit about your style, but start by just telling me how formal or casual you are in your home.
Hmm.
And then that immediately starts them going. A lot of clients I've noticed freeze when you ask about aesthetic or style specifically. But if you ask about formality, they immediately know who they are and they can immediately tell you, well, we're actually pretty formal people. We do a lot of hosting. We like this type of millwork, and suddenly they know exactly who they are. They freeze though in saying, well, I'm traditional, or they don't want to put a label to their aesthetic, but they can describe it. Once, if you, and formal versus informal has always been my gateway to getting there. It also tells me a lot about how they live in their homes. So it answers two questions really quickly.
Yeah, I think the value of how they live in their home. I like to understand the profession too. I think there's a lot of value in
Mm,
that. I mean, you mentioned we both kind of did. The team, knowing, who, if there's going to be landscape architect, maybe lighting architect. If you have, you know, the, seeing how the client values the team, right?
hmm. Yeah.
And I've seen that, and maybe this has kind of taken us a direction where you're looking for that ideal client, maybe from a business development arm. But I've seen that, my best experiences with clients are ones that are entrepreneurs, right? That have built businesses, that have systems, that have, personnel and team members, and they understand, one, the life of an entrepreneur. So life of
Hmm.
Kate, right? What she's dealing
Yeah.
with, and as well as myself. And then number two, um, seeing the value of team that has systems, right? Because the thing is, there is a cost. Like, you're not
Yeah.
going to be the most inexpensive or expensive, but there's a cost to what you provide. And so having clients that understand that and value that, it's going to be a project that's going to probably tend to lean more towards the success, as long as we all perform, right? That,
Hmm.
from the basis that they're all on the same page.
Yeah. No, without a doubt. Man, the team, it like it comes down at the end of the day to the client and the team. And that's where the dream project is made, right? And that's also where sometimes disasters emerge when you don't have the full team put together, or you don't have a client with really realistic expectations or fair expectations, that's where things tend to break down.
What do you feel are maybe misnomers, right? What
Mhm.
someone who isn't maybe used to having an interior design on every project. So, do you find yourself fighting any battles of whether it's I don't want to say reputation, but maybe someone's thought of, "Oh, I don't need design, I love design." Like, how do you fight maybe that aspect of a client coming in with maybe a predisposed notion of what you do and what you provide to the project?
Sure. So, okay. So, in my perfect nightmare scenario, I'm working with an architect who thinks we're just going to run rough trod over their whole vision and destroy everything. A builder who thinks we're going to cause the project to take tons more time and cost twice as much as it should have,
Right.
and just destroy it, just make cause like 17 million change orders over the course of the project, and a client who thinks that we're there to go shopping with them every single day. That sounds
You
like
set it up
probably
perfect.
the
Yeah.
perfect nightmare project right there. Because there are these come from somewhere, right?
Right.
So they come from somewhere. It's not like this is out of nowhere. There are designers who will not respect the vision of the architect that the architect came up with the client, let's not forget. And there are designers who will not be respectful of budgets and timelines and who are just going to artistically take whatever time that they want, and maybe that's what the client wants too. And wouldn't that have been nice to know from the beginning, probably in your shoes? And there are designers who will, really shop and take their time with a client. Now, we take our time with a client. We get to know our clients and they become people that we have this incredible relationship with. But the clients who value us are valuing our expertise in leading the design, and probably pushing. They're probably not going to do this only once in their lives. So they're less risk averse than, let's say, a mid tier client who might be building and designing. This might be the one and only, and this is their dream home. And that can make every decision really feel like life or death because they don't want to get it wrong. And the design we get to do on those projects tends to be a bit more conservative. It tends to look a little bit more like Pinterest. And because those clients tend to really want to lean into the familiar. Whereas a client with multiple homes or who's going to do multiple homes over the course of their lives, they're going to take risks. They want to do something truly unique and original. This isn't going to define them for the rest of their lives. And, they also want to know that we're going to be discreet and that we're going to respect their privacy, that we are going to be financial stewards of the project, but also that we're going to make sure that they have a beautiful experience from start to finish, because for this client, the experience is as important to them as the end result a lot of the time, because their scarcity is probably not their budget. Their scarcity is the time they're spending. And so they want that time spent well. So we try to be all of those things for our client across the way, as I imagine you do too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so well said. I mean, it's funny as you answer that by giving your nightmare client, because I will say that, I mean, I haven't heard as of late, but I know early on I'd hear that comment from builders specifically.
Sure.
Oh, if you have a designer, it's going to be more expensive. Take, all the normal stuff. Until you realize like just that value of, right, the relationship, and that, what designers bring to the project. I mean, the funny thing is, now fast forward to this point in my career, my team will literally like revolt if we don't have a designer, because like the amount
Yeah.
of information and value that the designer brings. And really, at the end of the day, there's value, there's inspiration in great design, right? And the thing is, it eliminates the finger pointing that happens to us as builders by trying to interpret what the design has to be or what the client's wanting because it's on paper now. And so it really
Right.
helps us, solve those issues that sometimes come into play as a builder.
Well, and I sometimes talk with builders who prefer working with a designer but don't always get to.
Mhm.
And they, you know, once they've had that experience often enough, they see that we expedite the decisions. We make
Right.
sure the decisions
Right.
happen. Give us the punch list, give us the schedule. The decisions will happen. And if they're not happening, it's now our job. It's off your plate because we're now saying, hey, the builder's going to come to you soon and tell you that things are about to come to a screeching halt because they don't have the materials, right? How can we do this? So we get to start having and facilitating we help make the decisions easier, right? We give our clients either the reassurance that they're on the right path and that they are making good decisions and that things are going well. That might be a little bit more like mid-tier leaning, right? So for custom homes, but maybe on the earlier tier where this might be the one and only they do or the first that they've done. And then moving on to the luxury side, where they're just almost being like a secondary project manager from the standpoint of are all the decisions getting made on time and making sure our clients know like we're here as leaders of the design side of the project to get this through. And they'll often um, be a lot quicker to decide because because they've heard. I've heard some of my designers on my team will, you know, set the meeting up and say, today we will be making these decisions. It's not we're hoping to or we're going to look into. Today we will be making these decisions, and anything we don't decide today, we have a meeting scheduled 2 days from now or 1 week from now or 2 weeks from now, whatever it needs to be depending on the timeline, to finalize these decisions because they have to be done by the end of the month. And that's, firm words, kind tone, it gets done.
I love that. I mean, it's so good. Let me ask you this, because one thing I know that a lot of designers, and maybe from personal experience, something that I've heard just through conversation is they
Hmm.
speak about burnout, right? Because all of us to some extent get burnout, but what's really tough about the creative side, like maintaining creativity, in a profession that demands constant, inspiration. Like how it's funny because a client may look at this and be like, "Wait, it took you this many hours to, select a paint color," without realizing that there's a lot more that goes into selecting a paint color, than with trying to work through all the total design by itself. But the reality is creativity can cause burnout. Like, how do you manage that for you yourself and then for your team?
Well, for myself, I sometimes sound a bit like, a bit of a lunatic because I follow a very regimented schedule for myself. And I get up at 5 a.m. every day. I work out. Working out is a big part of my self-care. I love weightlifting and,
It's awesome.
doing the things that I do. I was deadlifting this morning.
Look at
Uh,
you. That's awesome.
so I have that, and then I actually have the first 2 to 3 hours of my day, depending on where you count the start after working out, as my focus time. So this is when I am maybe working on the business and maybe not. I might be working on a rug line for like a collection for the rug company. I might be working on something a little bit more creative that isn't, straight just business, but is fulfilling to me. And I started doing that because I reflected on the fact that at the end of every day, I was really tired and I sometimes would just almost sit and stare at a wall, that feeling. And, um, and that was my time for myself, and that did not feel very rejuvenating. And so I decided I'm going to block out the beginning of the day for myself. And it might be I'm going on a hike, and it might be I'm doing something creative, but having that start to my day is very, very intentional, and it is a part of my everyday, and my team knows it. And then after that, I feel like I'm a lot at, you know, I have my time blocked out very intentionally. I have sat down and really said, what is my job? How much of my time should be going to various activities? I've put a percent next to it all. This is where I think I sound like a little bit of a lunatic. By the way, I've really said if all of these things are my job, how much time should go to it? And then I have that much time blocked out in my calendar every week, so that if you were to come to me with something that is for my time needs to be made a lower priority, even if there's time in my schedule, if that hour that I have allocated to that per week is blocked out, you might have to wait a week or two or three or four to get onto my calendar to do that thing, because I can't have those things taking up so much of my time. And that used to happen to me. So I've really become intentional about clearing my schedule for the things where I need to spend time, but making time for the things that other people need me for. There's a little bit of both. And that has given me so, so much more like clarity, I think, in my mind. And I like to go outside a lot. I like to actually touch grass, so to speak. I find that just being outside and getting fresh air, if I'm ever getting stressed out, walk outside, throw the ball for the dog a few times, and I come back in and I feel 1,000 times better.
It's funny how it'll
Uh,
do that, right? Just being outside.
Immediately, just like that. For my team,
Yeah.
everybody, we do our best. So, what I do with my team, with my designers in particular, what I do is every week, every Monday, so I did this today, we have a check in about all of the projects that they're processing. And one of the final check ins we do is a quick gut check toward what sort, like basically, what sort of projects would they be open for right now? We have a few different categories. What sort of do they feel any like how open are they? We have a scale. Like, I'm actually my schedule is open. I just wrapped up some projects, so I really am open to something, or this is what I'm most interested in, but I actually have zero time for it. And then when, on what time table would they be open? Now we have other ways to track this, but I want the person to tell me how they're feeling as well, and that can sometimes reveal when someone's feeling overwhelmed. And then part of that too, we'll usually check in about kind of just do you have the support that you need right now? And if I'm hearing from somebody that they are booked way out, they're feeling low supported, like there are certain numbers, or we sort of do things on a scale. And if I'm hearing certain things on a scale, we'll sometimes check in.
Mhm.
And I was actually at a conference in Napa in February and received a call from two different senior designers on my team while I was there, saying, "You know what, I need help." And I realized the two of them had just, that when you have too many irons in the fire and
Mhm.
everyone pulls the trigger at the same exact time, mixing metaphors here, that had happened to both of them. And so I was making some phone calls internally, and what we did is we just basically reassembled our teams a little bit. And this is something fortunate that we can do because I have a team of 30. And so between North, South, and all of our admin and marketing support, we were able to pull some additional support for each of them, to carry them through. For one, she really just needed it through the end of the month, and the other needed about 2 to 3 months of extra support. So we just rearranged
Mhm.
and managed it. But those are
Smart.
real conversations that we have, and we try to speak pretty openly about it. So it's, I know who's feeling overwhelmed, I hope, and I know who's feeling like they're having a blast and would like to take on another project.
I love that. I mean, especially to have a good pulse on your team. I mean, you found a solution for you, right? The
Hmm.
fresh air, working out in the morning. But, it's tough sometimes when you have that loyal following of people that want to do a great job for the company, for you, for the clients, and, making sure you have some indicators that they may need some additional help or,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's so tough. Like what we do is so hard, because you always have to be on. And, there's just a level of stress from design and construction that I don't think anyone realizes unless they're in the business.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have to admit, for all that I have this great schedule and this great way of managing things, I travel a ton. You do too.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other
Yeah.
level of where that happens. So I flew back in town where I am now, Sunday morning, and we some friends wanted to go out to breakfast, and we arrived at breakfast, and my husband turned to our friends and said, "Listen, Kate's a little bit nonverbal right now, but I've given her basically a puzzle, and she's going to do a puzzle while we all hang out, and she'll be better soon." And that's truly, I was like, I can barely hold a conversation. I warned him in the car. I was like, I'm here, but
Yeah.
he was like, "How was the trip?" And I was like, I can't. I can't wait to tell you about it, but I can't possibly tell you about it right now. I can't even think about it. And it was a great trip. It was nothing
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
good, but I can't even. So, so we all hit those
Yeah.
moments.
We do that extrovert, like you need that introvert time to
That's exactly
recharge.
what it was.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's exactly
So
it.
real quick, I know, for sake of time, there's one more question I wanted to ask you, Kate, is that along this point, I mean, you speak a lot. I mean, you travel, you are on panels. How have you found, and I don't want to know about the balance, but more, how have you seen just that personal brand of Kate O'Hara? How has that, enhanced the company brand? How have you seen, that growth, notoriety? thought leadership, all the above, those relationships played a role in your personal growth and company growth.
My gosh, I'm so glad you asked about this because this has been something that I don't think we talk about enough,
Right.
and I think is so important. We a couple years ago, I had taken over the company, so my mom founded it. I have been with it for over like 15 years now. I think we're at 17 or so, and 6 years ago took over running it. And that was, if you do the math, right before the pandemic. So
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
much time to be like, hooray, there
Mhm.
wasn't any of that. It was just go. But after a few years in, my marketing team came to me and said, we never actually announced that you took over. Like it just happened and we never really told anyone. So it was time to do that. And when we did, we also realized it was a good moment to rebrand because there was starting to be confusion around who's Martha. So truly, I mean, this became a whole conversation I sometimes had to have. So what we did is we rebranded the company, and when we did that, we realized that I needed a brand and some intention behind how we put me forward. And I was already doing a lot of speaking, but suddenly we were really talking about, okay, what does this mean for the company, and who am I as a figurehead for the company, but also a pillar of the company, and also maybe something separate from the company. So um, we we took the time to do that intentionally, and it's I'm so glad that we did because it gives me a lot of I you hear me say clarity a lot because
Mhm.
I like to understand the purpose behind what I'm doing. I like to know that there's a reason behind it, and it also has to feel real. I have to be who I am, right? But understanding how I would talk about myself and what my role and what my role is and what sorts of things I might be in pursuit of that would help the company has been really helpful. The opportunity to speak on a podcast like yours is really helpful for our brand. It helps to assure our partners sometimes of the type of business that they think we are. Hopefully, this reinforces that. And sometimes they're learning about us from moments like this. But our clients like to know that they're working with a designer that's been featured in Elle Decor
Mhm.
or Veranda or Arc Digest. They like to know that they're working with a designer that has a history. The entrepreneurs among our clients like to know that they're working with a solid business foundation. They like knowing that, and so do our partners too. They like to know that we're not going to disappear, and that even if something were to happen or someone needed to step away temporarily, that we do have this team that can step in. So I think that my rebrand or brand, I don't know that it was a rebrand, but me kind of stepping into this role and
Right.
getting branded a little bit as who I am to the company has helped clarify who the company is, and also has given me just a little bit more of a platform. I'm not just Martha's daughter anymore, and there was a time when that's really who I was within the company, and I think it's been helpful for a million reasons, and it's uh, it's been fun too. It's opened up some doors and given me an opportunity to do things. I imagine you're out there all the time and you really are the face of your company too. And so you must experience this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to you. It's amazing, Kate. I mean, even outside of maybe, the customer advocacy, right, where they have a lot more certainty that, hey, there's a lot standing behind this company. They're well known, right? There's a lot of credibility, right? That gives
Hmm.
them
Hmm.
security in the investment they're making in you. Um, but in addition to business development and relationships that we've had with, projects that have come our way from people we've met, whether they be
Hmm.
clients direct or architects or designers. But, to your point, I think that there's a lot of, sitting on the panel with you, there's a lot I picked up on, right? And so you're learning all the time from these incredibly talented people, and you can bring those experiences and thoughts and resources home and implement those with your team. And so I find a lot of value just in maybe there's a commitment that you and I have to travel, but the benefits, far outweigh, that commitment for sure.
Oh yeah. Every time I usually know at least one, I like there to be one or two reasons that I make a trip, right? It's got to serve a couple purposes, but there are also times when I'll go to something saying, I know it'll be good for this reason or that reason, but probably the most important thing that's going to come out of this trip, I'll know after the trip. I won't know
Mhm.
until afterward. I mean, meeting you, I couldn't have predicted that going to Luann's conference,
Right?
and that was such a wonderful moment to get to sort of meet you and then follow up afterward. It was, and so on. I mean, things kind of build from there. I have time again. I actually went to Luann's. I don't think we met. I went to Luann's conference. I waved at you from across the room, and then after that, we got to speak on a panel together.
We did, yeah.
You were surrounded by a million people who wanted to hear all of your incredible insights. You were an absolute highlight of that conference. So I couldn't make it through the crowds.
That's okay. Like, that little exaggeration, but the thing is, Kate, what's awesome is, as we close this out, what's funny, as you said, early on, you were speaking on processes. I will say that although we haven't had a project together, you sent me over your processes and your system and like intro and your like pre-qualification, if you will. And it's very impressive. I mean, you could tell that you're a very, very established firm and very talented. And of course, I've seen the work you do, which is just incredible. So, um, just can't thank you enough for coming on because you're truly talented yourself, and and it just shows with what you are doing with the company. So kudos to you. It's very awesome.
Well, thank you. I've been looking forward to this and really glad that we've just been staying connected. It's been so fun. I feel like I get to learn a little something every time we talk.
Yeah, same here. So for those listening, Kate, that are looking to reach out to you, whether they want to hire you or anything else or network, where can they find you?
You can find us at o'harainteriors.com. Uh, Also on Instagram at O'Hara_interiors, as well as at the Kate O'Hara or at Fay and Bell Rugs.
It's amazing. All right, we'll have all those uploaded. So thanks again, Kate.
Thank you. Take care.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.